Why was her voice the one they always dismissed? Staff Sergeant Reeves lay prone in the Syrian dust, her cheek pressed to the spotting scope, sweat stinging her eyes. She repeated the wind speed, the humidity, the range, every number precise, every detail double-checked. The kind of calculation she had done on 17 missions before, 17 missions without error. And yet, as always, it wasn't her finger on the trigger. That privilege belonged to Sergeant First Class Tours, the golden boy of the team, the one whose name carried weight in the sniper community. 27 confirmed kills, a record that made his confidence look like a second skin. He didn't need her math, he didn't need her eyes, he didn't even need her voice. At least, that's how he made it sound. But when the world hung on a bullet, always listened, because never miscalculated. Range confirmed, she whispered, steady, controlled, even as her pulse thudded in her ears. 1,247 meters, wind 4 miles per hour southeast, mirage steady. Grunted, his big hands shifted the into position. He adjusted the scope, breathing slow and deliberate. It should have been a routine mission. Neutralize the target, extract without detection, back to base before sunset. She caught sight of the man through her scope, a bearded figure in flowing robes, stepping from a white SUV surrounded by lieutenants. Al's bomb maker, the one responsible for every mangled convoy they'd pulled apart from the desert roads. He was right there. Taking the shot, breathed. Steadied herself, watching, waiting. She felt the sun burning against her neck, the grit gathering at the corner of her lips, the tension in her muscles as she braced for the impact that should come next. The roared. The desert swallowed the sound, echoing it back across the valley. But her eyes widened. The bullet slammed into dirt 3 feet left of the target. Negative hit, she reported flatly, though her heart lurched into her throat. Chaos erupted at the compound. Shouting, guards scattering. The bearded man dove behind the SUV, shouting orders. They'd been exposed. His voice cracked. No, that's impossible. Everything was perfect. Stomach sank. She could see fighters moving already, scaling up the hill toward them, weapons glinting in the sun. They had minutes at most. We need to move, she hissed, shouldering her pack, clutching her carbine. But he wasn't moving. He was staring at his rifle like it had betrayed him. She barked, yanking at his shoulder. Finally, he snapped out of it, clumsy hands breaking down the weapon. They moved, bounding down the hill as rounds cracked overhead, striking rocks and showering them with fragments. Every step pounded with the same truth. The mission was blown, and somehow she knew who would pay for it. The helicopter blades grew louder in the distance. They'd make it out alive, but the storm wasn't behind them. It was waiting at base. The debriefing room at Forward Operating Base Phoenix felt more like a courtroom than anything else. White walls, harsh lights. Colonel Stone at the head of the table, sharp-eyed, reputation for fairness but not mercy. To her left, Master Sergeant Tyler Brooks, arms folded, his face carved from stone. To her right, Tours, shoulders stiff, eyes hollow. Sat across from them, spine straight, hands clenched against her thighs to keep from shaking. Sergeant Tours, Colonel Stone began, her voice even. Walk me through your shot. His hands trembled as he opened his notes. His voice was quiet. Ma'am, conditions were optimal, range confirmed, wind minimal, humidity stable, temperature 95. I followed procedure, breath control, sight alignment, trigger squeeze. Fundamentals were perfect. The shot should have landed. Stone's eyes flicked too. Sergeant Reeves, you provided the calculations. Yes, ma'am. Her voice didn't waver. Confirmed digitally and manually. Mirage, vegetation, multiple readings. Data was precise. Brooks leaned forward, his voice cutting. Colonel, we need to consider all possibilities. Sergeant Reeves has been lobbying for sniper school. Perhaps her attention wasn't where it should have been. His jaw clenched. With respect, Master Sergeant, are you accusing me of sabotaging the mission? I'm suggesting mistakes happen, Brooks said coldly, especially when ambition clouds focus. The accusation sat heavy in the air, shifted uneasily beside her, saying nothing. Wanted to scream, wanted to slam the table, but her voice stayed level. 17 missions, 0 errors, every calculation checked and triple-checked. And suddenly, on the one day that matters most, I decide to sabotage my own survival. No one spoke. The air conditioning hummed. Colonel Stone finally raised a hand. Enough. Sergeant Reeves, until we complete a review, you're reassigned to administrative duties. This isn't punishment, it's protocol. Protocol, that word burned. She followed the others out, but as turned to leave, she caught his arm. You know this wasn't my fault, she whispered. He wouldn't meet her eyes. I know the numbers were right, he muttered. But I also know I don't miss shots like that. Something went wrong, until we figure out what, everyone's going to have questions. And then he left her standing alone. 3 weeks. That's how long she'd been filing papers, taking inventory, becoming the ghost of a soldier who'd once been trusted. The whispers spread faster than desert sand in a storm. First, that she'd miscalculated. Then that she'd been jealous of his role. Then worse, that she'd deliberately sabotaged the mission. By week 3, she wasn't just incompetent. She was unfit, dangerous. Brooks fanned the flames, his pointed comments about loyalty echoing across morning formations. He never said her name, but everyone knew who he meant. And he stayed silent. That silence cut deeper than any bullet ever could. The breaking point came during a base-wide briefing. Brooks clicked to a slide titled Lessons Learned. The first bullet point read, "Spotters must prioritize mission success over personal career goals." The eyes of the room turned on her. Sat 3 rows ahead, staring straight ahead, saying nothing. That night called her sister in Colorado. Emma's voice was soft, warm, familiar. "You sound terrible. What's going on?" Stared at the photos on her desk. Graduation. First day with the unit. A team photo with and Brooks, all smiling like they believed in each other. She almost broke, almost told her everything. But instead she whispered, "Just work stress. Nothing I can't handle." After the call, she sat alone, the silence pressing in. And something inside her hardened. She wouldn't let them define her as a failure. She wouldn't let their silence, their accusations, their prejudice be the last word. If they thought she didn't belong behind the trigger, she'd prove them wrong. And when the mission briefing came the next morning, Reeves didn't know it yet, but fate was about to give her exactly the chance she was waiting for. What kind of soldier volunteers for the impossible? The emergency briefing came before sunrise. Every sniper team was summoned to the operations center, the air in the room buzzing with a mixture of caffeine and nerves. Screens glowed with satellite imagery, topographical lines cutting across jagged mountains. Shouldn't have been there. She was still reassigned, still a ghost in uniform, and yet Colonel Stone had summoned her by name. When she walked in, the room fell silent. Dozens of eyes tracked her to the back corner. Some looked amused, others hostile. Brooks stared like he'd swallowed a stone, refused to look at her at all. Stone's voice cut through the tension. 12 hours ago, intelligence confirmed the location of Al. The room shifted. Even the seasoned shooters leaned forward. Al wasn't just another target. He was the target. The spider at the center of the web, responsible for hundreds of attacks, hundreds of dead soldiers. Stone clicked to the next slide, a fortified compound built into a mountainside. Direct assault is impossible, is not an option. Too many civilians. Our only viable shot is from here. She pointed to a ridge line, labeled Point Alpha. A murmur rippled. One man chuckled under his breath. Stone didn't smile. Distance, 3,540 meters, just over 2 miles. Silence. Every sniper in the room knew the truth. 1 mile was tough. 1.5 miles was extraordinary, But 2 miles, that was legend. Brooks broke the silence first. Colonel, with respect, that's outside the effective range of any weapon we have. The longest confirmed shot in history is about this distance, but under perfect conditions with specialized gear. This is combat. It's suicide. Stone's expression didn't change, which is why this mission will be strictly volunteer. For a moment the room was still, then's voice cut through. I shouldn't take the shot. Dozens of heads snapped toward him. The golden boy, the record-holding sniper, the man who never missed until he had. His jaw tightened. My last mission I missed at 1200, and since then, every time I look through a scope I second-guess myself. That's not the mindset for this distance, not for this mission. The words hung in the air like smoke, for to admit doubt was unthinkable. Stone's voice was calm. If not you, then who? Didn't know when she'd stood up. She only realized it when every face turned toward her. I'll take the shot. The room erupted. Brooks slammed his fist on the table. Absolutely not. Reeves isn't sniper qualified. She's never fired long range in combat. She's insane, another muttered. Stone raised a hand. Sergeant Reeves, you're not trained as a shooter. What makes you believe you can succeed where others would fail? His throat was dry, but her voice didn't shake. Because I've spent 2 years studying long-range ballistics. I know the math better than anyone here. I've run simulations at this distance dozens of times, and I'm not carrying the doubt Sergeant Torres is carrying. I have clarity. Brooks barked a laugh. Clarity, what she has is ambition. Colonel, you can't seriously. But didn't look at him. She locked her eyes on Stone. Ma'am, give me the chance. I can do this. For a long moment the room simmered with disbelief. Then, from the back, another voice. I'll train her. Every head swiveled. Chief Warrant Officer Franklin Ghost Mitchell stepped forward. Mitchell was a legend, the quiet kind. Gray at the temples, small glasses perched on his nose, he looked more like a professor than a killer. But his record was whispered about on every base. 30 confirmed kills at extreme range. Shots other men said weren't possible until Ghost proved them wrong. Stone looked stunned. Mitchell, this wasn't your briefing. I heard enough. His eyes settled on. Her analysis was sharper than half the men in this room. Technical knowledge alone won't cut it, but combined with discipline, it might. If anyone can adapt in 30 hours, it's her. Brooks nearly shouted. This is madness. You can't teach someone in 30 hours what takes years. Mitchell's gaze didn't waver. Maybe, but we don't have years. We have one chance. And right now, she's the only one with the conviction to take it. The silence stretched. Stone finally exhaled, heavy, decisive. Very well, Chief Mitchell, you have 30 hours to prepare Sergeant Reeves. If you decide she's not ready, we abort. Understood? Mitchell nodded once. And just like that's fate was sealed. They started not at the range, but at the pool hall. Stared at the rack of balls as Mitchell set them with meticulous care. Sir, with respect, what are we doing here? Learning to see, Mitchell said simply. He handed her a cue. What's the most important skill in long-range shooting? Range estimation, wind calculation, ballistics. All secondary, the core skill is visualization, seeing the path before it happens, executing without doubt. He leaned, struck, and the cue ball glided smooth as glass, kissing the corner ball at a perfect angle. The shot wasn't about power, it was about precision. For 2 hours repeated his movements. Grip, breath, follow-through. Every miss was a lesson. Every shot forced her to slow down, predict, trust. Feel how tension changes the outcome, Mitchell murmured. Notice how your shoulders shift your aim. Pool is physics in miniature. The same rules govern a bullet's path, only over miles. By the end, her arms ached, but something clicked. She saw the line of energy before her hand moved. She saw the future. Then came the rifle. The M200 intervention, a weapon built for ranges others called impossible. Sleek, heavy, engineered for control. Mitchell placed it in her hands like a sacred object. This rifle doesn't forgive. It demands perfection. Treat it like an extension of yourself. She field-stripped it blindfolded, reassembled it, memorized the feel of every part. She whispered its specs like prayer. Round, supersonic beyond 2,000 meters, match-grade precision, scope with fine adjustments. By the time dawn broke, the rifle no longer felt foreign. It felt like hers. But owning a weapon and commanding it were different things, and Mitchell knew that. At the range, they started at 800 meters, twice what most soldiers ever fired, for it was a trial by fire. Natural point of aim, Mitchell coached. Don't fight your body, align it, let the rifle rest where it wants. She adjusted, breathed, fired. The recoil slammed into her shoulder, but she held, eyes locked to the scope. Dust puffed low and left. Good for a first shot, Mitchell said calmly. Now refine. For hours they worked, position, breathing, timing. She learned to fire at the natural pause between breaths when her body was stillest. She learned to feel wind in the shimmer of heat waves, the twitch of distant brush. She was striking within 6 inches of center. Mitchell gave a rare smile. Not bad for someone who's never fired at range. But the real test came when he pushed her to 1,200. The distance had failed at. Here, every mistake. A heartbeat shifted the bullet feet off target. A breath dragged it high. Even with perfect math, the delay between trigger and impact stretched into eternity. This is why Torres missed, realized aloud. Not the math, the waiting, the pressure. Mitchell lowered his scope, studying her. Now you understand. Long-range shooting is more mental than physical. Most collapse under that weight. Don't. Her shots tightened. 18 inches, 12, 8, still not perfect, but steady. Mitchell's eyes narrowed. Good, but remember your mission is 3 times this distance. The math doesn't scale. The difficulty isn't linear, it's exponential. He showed her charts. At 2 miles, bullet drop measured in dozens of feet. Wind drift in yards. 4 seconds of flight time where anything, a breath, a step, a gust, could ruin everything. Study the numbers. So even perfect execution might not be enough. Correct, Mitchell said. Which is why we go beyond conventional. Tomorrow, we use advanced modeling, atmospheric sensors, simulations. But even then, success will demand something science can't give. What's that? Mitchell's eyes were steady. You. That night didn't sleep. She sat hunched over a terminal, running calculations in software originally built for artillery strikes. Variables stacked across the screen. Temperature, humidity, air pressure, ballistic coefficients. She adjusted each by fractions, running simulations until the numbers blurred. The truth was brutal. At 2 miles, even the smallest error bloomed into disaster. 1 degree of temperature off, missed by 18 inches. 2 miles per hour of wind unaccounted for, missed by 3 feet. But she refused to blink, refused to surrender. By the time dawn came, she had built a firing solution spanning 3 pages, a mathematical masterpiece that pushed human precision to its edge. Her body was exhausted, her eyes bloodshot, but her resolve was iron. Tomorrow, she would attempt the impossible. And if she failed, her career, her name, her future would be over. How much can you learn in 30 hours when the world is watching? The alarm tore through the silence at 4:30 but was already awake. She hadn't really slept. Instead, she'd spent the night disassembling and reassembling the M200, fingers memorizing the rifle's anatomy until every part felt like muscle memory. The bolt, the scope mount, the bipod, each piece belonged to her now, like bones in her own body. When she stepped out into the pre-dawn desert, the horizon was painted in bruised orange and pale pink. Chief Mitchell was already waiting at the range, calm as ever, adjusting environmental monitors and setting up targets at distances that seemed impossible to even see without glass. He didn't look up as she approached. Sleep. She shook her head. Good, he said without a hint of sarcasm. Sometimes exhaustion strips away what doesn't matter, leaves only focus. Today you'll need that. Dropped into prone, sliding the rifle into her shoulder. Her heart raced. The steel target at 800 meters already seemed impossibly small, and yet, compared to the balcony 2 miles away, it was a barn door. Breathing, Mitchell reminded her. Don't force it, let the body fall quiet. Fire during the pause, always the pause. She exhaled, pressed, and fired. The rifle barked, sharp and violent, and dust jumped 6 inches from center. Again, Mitchell said. For hours they drilled, 800 meters, 1,000, 1,200. Each distance punished her differently. At shorter ranges, impatience ruined her grouping. At longer ones, the delay between trigger pull and impact stretched her nerves thin. Time slowed. Her arms ached from holding position. Her shoulder burned from recoil. Her eyes blurred from staring through glass. Still, she pressed on because every miss was a warning. If she faltered on the mission, there would be no second chance. By mid-morning, Mitchell finally called a halt. Good enough, he said, studying her shot groupings. Now we stretch. He pointed to the farthest silhouette on the range, 1,500 meters. Beyond that, there were no targets. The facility simply didn't allow it. This is the edge, Mitchell said. Our math says if you can hold here, we can extrapolate to mission distance. But understand, 1,500 meters isn't 3,500. The bullet doesn't scale linearly. Errors multiply. One twitch of a finger at this distance becomes yards at 2 miles. Studied the target, a faint speck shimmering in the morning heat. She forced herself to slow her breathing, to remember every lesson. She squeezed, the rifle cracked. 3 seconds later, the steel rang faintly. A smile tugged at the corner of Mitchell's mouth. Outstanding, 6 inches from center, do it again. She did, again and again. By the end of the session, her grouping at 1,500 meters was inside an 8-inch circle. Mitchell finally lowered his spotting scope. Your fundamentals are locked, but that's not the real battle tomorrow. What is? She asked, wiping sweat from her brow. Mitchell looked at her with the cool gaze of a man who'd seen soldiers break under less. Your mind. Long-range shooting is 90% mental. At 2 miles, physics is brutal. You can't control wind in the valley or heat shimmer on the mountain. All you control is yourself. Doubt kills more shots than math ever does. Nodded, but the words hit deeper than she let on, because doubt was already gnawing at her. That night the base was quiet. Sat in the comms center with Mitchell, their screens glowing with streams of data, temperature profiles, wind readings, humidity charts. Together, they built the firing solution line by line. Scope elevation, windage adjustments, bullet drop, time of flight. The numbers sprawled across pages. At one point leaned back, rubbing her eyes. Sir, what if we're wrong, even by a little, one miscalculation and... Mitchell cut her off gently. That's the truth of this distance, perfection or failure, no middle ground, but listen to me, Reeves, we've run the math 100 ways. The numbers hold. The variables are as tight as we can make them. The rest, he tapped his chest. The rest is heart, that's you. Stared at the pages. Perfect numbers, perfect theory. And yet she couldn't shake the image of his bullet missing by 3 feet. Perfect numbers hadn't saved him. She swallowed the thought. She couldn't let fear have a voice. Not now. At dawn, Mitchell threw her a curve she didn't expect. Moving targets. Al won't stand still, he reminded her, setting up mechanized silhouettes that swayed and shifted. At 2 miles, even a step can ruin you. You must anticipate, predict patterns. Through the scope she tracked the target, waited, fired, missed. Again, miss. Her frustration burned hotter with every shot. The time delay between firing and impact made prediction feel like chasing shadows. By the time her bullet reached the target, it had already shifted. She clenched her jaw. It's impossible. Exactly, Mitchell said. That's why no one else volunteered. But listen, intelligence says Al always stands at the southwest corner of the balcony during meetings. Always. Patterns are everything. Wait for the pattern, trust it. She breathed, waited, tracked the silhouette's loop, fired, the steel clanged. Mitchell gave a rare nod. Now you're learning. For hours they repeated. By the end wasn't just reacting. She was predicting, feeling rhythm instead of chasing chaos. When the final session ended, lay in the dirt, drenched in sweat, her arms trembling from exhaustion. Mitchell crouched beside her. "You're as ready as anyone could be in 30 hours," he said. "But readiness isn't certainty. Tomorrow you'll carry two truths with you. You may fail, and failure means lives. If you can live with that, you'll be steady. If not, you'll crumble." Rolled onto her back, staring at the pale blue sky, the weight of it all pressed down. The mission, the math, the whispers, the silence from Brooke's smirk, her career, her name. Could she really bear it all on one trigger pull? She thought of Emma back home, of her sister's voice on the phone. "You sound terrible. You can talk to me about anything." She hadn't told Emma the truth, but tomorrow Emma would know. Everyone would know. She clenched her fists. "I won't crumble." Mitchell studied her face for a long moment. Then he stood. "Good, because tomorrow Sergeant Reeves' history won't care about excuses, only results." The helicopter insertion was set for 800. 8 personnel, 2 sniper teams for overwatch, comms support, and with Mitchell at Point Alpha. As lay awake that night, the hours dragging toward dawn, the truth gnawed at her again. This wasn't just about a shot. It was about her life, her career, her identity. One squeeze of a trigger would decide whether she was remembered as a fraud or as the soldier who had done the impossible. She closed her eyes, the image of the balcony burned into her mind. The distance, the wind, the math. And the voice she heard, calm and steady, was Mitchell's. It was her own. "You belong here, prove it." When the first light touched the horizon, she rose, she dressed, she shouldered the... And as the helicopter blades spun to life, Reeves stepped forward into the morning knowing there was no turning back. Tomorrow was gone. The impossible had arrived. What does it feel like to carry the impossible on your back? The helicopter's rotors thundered overhead as Reeves and Chief Warrant Officer Mitchell crouched inside, their gear pressed tight to their bodies. Every vibration rattled through her bones, but she forced herself to focus on the rifle resting across her lap. The M200, heavier now, not just in steel, but in responsibility. 8 of them in total. 2 additional sniper teams, a comms specialist, and the forward observer with his laser rangefinder. More people than usual for what should have been a 2-person job. Proof that no one trusted her to succeed without layers of backup. Torres was there too, not at her side but positioned to provide overwatch 500 meters away. She had caught his eyes as they loaded up, and he gave her a single nod. No words, just acknowledgement, a fragment of the trust they once shared. As the chopper dipped low and the mountains rose into view, felt her chest tighten. The terrain looked even harsher in person than on satellite images, ridges jagged like teeth, valleys funneling the wind in unpredictable swirls. And somewhere up there, Al, the man who had killed hundreds by proxy. The man she was supposed to eliminate with one bullet from 2 miles away. 2 minutes, the crew chief shouted. Mitchell leaned toward her, his voice calm. "This is just another firing line. Don't give the distance power over you." She nodded, but her pulse betrayed her. This wasn't just another firing line. This was history. This was life and death. The helicopter banked, slowed, then flared into landing. Dust and grit whipped around them as the team disembarked, crouching low and moving fast. Within seconds the bird was gone, its thunder fading into the distance, leaving only silence and the hiss of the desert wind. Point Alpha wasn't much to look at. A rocky outcropping, barely big enough for in Mitchell, with little natural cover and winds that seemed to tug at every angle. She dropped prone, the rifle's bipod biting into stone. Range confirmed, the forward observer's voice crackled in her earpiece. 3,542 meters, target building bearing 127, elevation angle 12.7. The numbers matched their calculations almost exactly, a small mercy. Mitchell set up the environmental monitors, his movements slow and deliberate. Winds variable at our position, stronger down in the valley. Thermal updrafts along the mountain face. But so far, conditions are behaving as predicted. Adjusted her scope, the glass magnifying the compound in the distance. The balcony was there, impossibly small, a rectangle of shadow carved into stone. To the naked eye, it was a dot. Through the scope, it was her entire world. Time passed slowly. They had hours before Al's scheduled appearance, hours to watch, to calculate, to second-guess. Every gust of wind made stomach clench. Every flicker of heat shimmer looked like a betrayal waiting to happen. "Focus on what you can control," Mitchell reminded her. "The rest doesn't exist until it does." But waiting was its own battle. Minutes stretched into eternities. Sweat pooled at the small of her back. Her muscles stiffened from holding position. Her thoughts circled the same unrelenting questions. What if the math fails? What if I fail? What if I confirm every whisper they ever said about me? She closed her eyes briefly, hearing Emma's voice. "You can talk to me about anything." No, she couldn't. Not this. Some burdens lived only inside the soldier who carried them. At 1100 hours, her earpiece crackled. "Viper team, this is Overwatch. Intel update. Target's meeting has been moved up. Al will be visible in 30 minutes. Repeat, 30 minutes. His heart lurched. They'd expected 5 hours. Now they had 30 minutes. Mitchell's voice was steady in her ear. "Nothing changes but the clock. We're ready." But everything felt different. The rhythm of preparation, the gradual refinement of numbers, all of it compressed into a countdown that ticked louder with every breath. Adjusted her position, sweat dripping into her eyes. Through the scope, she saw the compound stir, vehicles pulling up, guards shifting into place, the signs of arrival. "Environmental update," Mitchell reported calmly. "Winds at 3.7 northeast in target zone. Stable thermal updrafts. Scope adjustment, 47.3 mils elevation, 2.1 left windage." She dialed the scope, every click loud in her ears. She forced herself to trust the numbers. The pages of calculations, the endless simulations, the hours of drilling. Trust. "Viper team, this is intelligence. Target is on site. Estimated visual in 5 minutes." Her pulse hammered. 5 minutes, that was all. Through the glass, shapes emerged, tiny figures stepping onto the balcony. To the naked eye, they were specks. Through they were men. One taller than the rest, in traditional robes. He moved to the southwest corner of the balcony, exactly where intelligence said he would. Positive ID came over the radio. "Al." Mitchell's voice was quiet but firm. "Target confirmed. You are clear to engage." Adjusted her breathing. Natural pause, just like training. Her crosshairs steadied on the figure, impossibly far away yet clear, as if she could reach out and touch him. Her finger moved to the trigger. "Sending," she whispered. The rifle bucked, recoil slamming into her shoulder. The report echoed off the ridges, rolling across the valley. And then silence. For 4.23 seconds, time itself held its breath. Every eye on the team was fixed on the balcony, watching a bullet crawl through the air across 2 miles of desert, watching history test the hands of a woman who was never meant to pull the trigger. The question wasn't whether she had fired. The question was whether she had done the impossible. What does 4 seconds of silence sound like? Through her scope, watched the bullet's path. A faint trace, almost invisible, cutting across heat waves and desert air. For a heartbeat, she thought she'd lost it, that the round had vanished into the void. And then impact. A puff of dust on the balcony, A flash of movement. Al jerked back, collapsing to the concrete. His lieutenants froze, confusion etched across their faces. Then panic spread. Target down, his voice cut through the comms, professional controlled. Confirmed kill, primary is. For a moment, the mountain itself seemed to exhale. 2 miles away, a terrorist leader who had orchestrated death for hundreds was silent forever. Mitchell lowered his scope, his voice steady. Confirmed, Reeves, you did it. The words barely registered. His body felt weightless, her mind caught between disbelief and relief. She had done it. The impossible. But celebration didn't belong here. Movement, another sniper called out over the net. Hostiles converging from all directions. Through her scope, saw fighters pouring out of buildings, weapons in hand, shouting orders. Vehicles roared to life. The entire compound was exploding with activity. Extraction zone compromised in 10 minutes, the comms specialist warned. We need to move now. Mitchell's voice snapped like a whip. Pack it, Reeves, on me. Pulled from its bipod, hands trembling but precise. Her ears were still ringing from the shot, but adrenaline pushed her forward. This wasn't over, not even close. The descent was chaos. Gunfire cracked from below, rounds sparking off stone. The enemy had traced the shot's origin, and now dozens were climbing the ridges, their rifles barking in angry rhythm. And Mitchell bounded down jagged terrain, each leap kicking up gravel that threatened to betray their position. Behind them, the other sniper teams provided covering fire, their rifles spitting controlled bursts. Left flank 10 o'clock, a voice shouted over comms. Swung her M4 carbine up, the slung heavy across her back. Figures appeared through the haze, dark silhouettes against brighter rock. She fired short, sharp bursts. One went down, another scattered. Keep moving, Mitchell barked, laying down fire of his own. The ridge became a gauntlet of stone and smoke. Bullets zipped overhead, smacking into rock, spraying fragments into their faces. Each impact was a reminder. She had made the shot, but if she died here, it wouldn't matter. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she pushed on. Not because she wanted glory, but because she wanted to live to see Emma again. To prove that she wasn't just a story whispered in doubt, but flesh and blood still breathing. The extraction point was a shallow clearing at the base of the ridge. The helicopter was already inbound, its distant thump growing louder. But so was the roar of engines, enemy trucks tearing across the desert, closing fast. Incoming technicals bearing east, the forward observer shouted. Dropped prone, unslinging the. She had seconds. No time for calculations, no wind charts, no ballistic computers, just instinct. She sighted the lead vehicle, its mounted gunner raising a heavy weapon toward the ridge. She exhaled, squeezed, and the rifle thundered. The round smashed into the windshield, shattering glass, throwing the driver sideways. The truck veered, crashing into a rock outcropping. Nice shot, Mitchell shouted. Move, move, move. They sprinted the final stretch, rounds peppering the ground around them. The helicopter appeared over the ridge line, skimming low, side door gunners spitting streams of fire at the advancing fighters. Dust swirled as the bird flared into landing. Go, 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 the crew chief screamed, waving them forward. Stumbled inside, Mitchell right behind her. The rest of the team piled in, dragging gear, covering each other with bursts of fire. The last man barely cleared the ground before the helicopter lifted, tilting hard as it roared skyward. Below, enemy fire chased them, tracers arcing like angry comets, but the distance grew, the compound shrank, the mountain receded. Only then did his chest unclench. Inside the helicopter, the noise was deafening. Gunfire, rotor wash, shouted commands, but for it all blurred into background. Her hands still tingled from recoil. Her shoulder throbbed, her heart hammered. Across from her sat silent, his rifle across his knees. When their eyes met, something passed between them, not rivalry, not accusation, but something closer to respect. He nodded once, more than he'd ever given her before. Mitchell leaned toward her, his calm cutting through the chaos. That was history, Reeves. Don't ever forget it, but don't let it own you either. She nodded, but the words barely sank in. Her mind was still on the balcony, on the 4 seconds where the world had held its breath, on the weight of knowing her bullet had ended a life that had ended so many others. The helicopter banked, the desert sliding away beneath them, and realized the shot had been the easy part. Living with it would be harder. The debriefing back at Forward Operating Base Phoenix was unlike any had ever known. The room wasn't heavy with accusation this time. It buzzed with awe. Colonel Stone sat at the head of the table, her expression unreadable. Mitchell stood beside, quiet as always, his presence solid. Was there too, posture stiff, but eyes alive with something she hadn't seen in weeks, admiration. The intelligence officer pulled up video from multiple scopes, showing the shot, the impact, the collapse. He spoke in measured tones, but his voice carried awe. Longest confirmed kill in military history, 3,542 meters. Impact, ballistic solution flawless. Stone leaned forward. Sergeant Reeves, what you accomplished goes beyond tactics. It challenges everything we thought possible in precision fire. Brooks, who had once doubted her openly, sat in silence, his jaw tight. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The shame on his face was enough. Sat still, her uniform dusty, her body aching, but her voice steady. I didn't do it alone. Mitchell gave me the tools. The team gave me the cover. I just did my part. But inside, she knew the truth. She had carried more than her part. She had carried the impossible. That night, alone in her quarters, stared at the rifle components spread across her desk. She ran her fingers over the cold steel, tracing every groove, every mark. Her phone buzzed, a message from Emma. Heard the news, they're calling you a hero. Are you okay? Stared at the words, hero, was that what this was? She thought of Al collapsing, of the chaos that followed, of the blood that would never flow again because she had pulled a trigger. She typed back, I'm alive, that's enough for now. Then she set the phone down, picked up the bolt and held it tight, because in the silence of her room, she knew something no briefing could explain. The world had changed in those 4 seconds, for Al, for the soldiers whose lives might be saved, for Reeves. And tomorrow, nothing would ever be the same again. What changes when the impossible is suddenly behind you? The base looked the same when walked across it the next morning, the same gravel crunching beneath boots, the same hum of generators, the same smell of oil and dust. But the way people looked at her wasn't the same, not anymore. Where once there had been dismissive glances or smirks hidden behind coffee cups, there was silence now. Soldiers stepped aside as she passed. Some nodded. Others simply stared, their expressions unreadable, half awe, half disbelief. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was unavoidable. But recognition didn't bring comfort. It felt heavy, like a shadow cast behind her with every step. In the mess hall, conversations hushed when she entered. Someone muttered her name as if it carried weight now. Kept her head down, tray in hand, but she could feel the burn of their eyes. At the far table, Brooks sat with his team, his jaw tight, his food untouched. He didn't look at her, not once. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like exile with a spotlight. Later in the armory, she cleaned with slow, deliberate movements. The rifle was spotless, but she needed the ritual. The smell of oil, the soft click of metal, it was grounding. Entered quietly. For a long moment he just stood watching her. Finally he spoke, you made the shot. She looked up, surprised at the softness in his tone. There was no edge, no condescension, just simple truth. I did, she said. He walked closer, pulling up a stool. His posture was stiff, his hands restless. When I missed in Kandahar, I told myself it was the wind, bad data, a fluke. But the truth, he hesitated, his voice lower now. I didn't trust myself, And once that doubt got in my head, it never left. It poisoned every shot after. Paused her cleaning, meeting his eyes. There was no arrogance in them now, no mask. Just a man stripped bare by failure. "I know what it's like to carry doubt," she said quietly. "It eats you alive." He nodded. "That's why I couldn't take the shot this time. But you had clarity. I don't know how, but you did." For a moment, silence stretched between them, then leaned closer. "I owe you an apology for every time I dismissed you, for not standing up when others tore you down. You deserved better." His throat tightened. She hadn't expected this, not from him. "Thank you," she whispered. But before the moment could settle, the armory door clanged open. Brooks stormed in, his eyes sharp as broken glass. "So this is what it takes to get respect around here. One lucky shot." Stood, his tone firm. "It wasn't luck, Brooks. You saw the data, you saw the conditions. She earned it." Brooks scoffed, his glare fixed on. "She humiliated all of us. Do you even realize that? Every sniper in this unit looks like a fraud now because a desk jockey walked in and made the impossible look easy." Stood slowly, her hands steady despite the fire in his words. "I didn't do it to humiliate anyone. I did it because no one else would." Brooks stepped closer, his voice low and venomous. "You're not a sniper, you never will be, and when the glory fades, you'll still be nothing." For a moment, the air crackled with tension, but Mitchell's voice broke it from the doorway. "Enough." The chief warrant officer's presence filled the room without raising his voice. His eyes, calm but sharp, locked on Brooks. "Reeves did what needed to be done. End of discussion. If you can't accept that, the problem isn't her. It's you." Brooks' jaw flexed. For a second thought he might lash out. But instead he spun on his heel and stormed out, leaving silence in his wake. Exhaled, shaking his head. He won't let this go. Mitchell's gaze softened as he looked at. "Let him carry his bitterness. You carry your purpose." That night lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. The base was quiet, but inside her chest, a storm brewed. The shot replayed in her mind, over and over, the recoil, the silence, the collapse of a man she had never met, yet whose death now defined her. Was this what it meant to be a soldier? To measure worth in ounces of trigger pressure? To trade anonymity for notoriety in a single squeeze? Her phone buzzed again. "Emma. The news is everywhere. They're calling you the best in the world. Is that true?" Stared at the message for a long time. Best in the world. It sounded absurd. She hadn't felt like the best. She had felt terrified, focused, determined, but never the best. She typed back, "I did my job, that's all." Emma's reply was immediate. "But you don't sound proud. Shouldn't you be proud?" Closed her eyes, the weight pressing down. She thought of the panic on the balcony, the men scattering, the chaos unleashed by her bullet. Pride wasn't the word for what she felt. Responsibility, maybe. Guilt, a little. Relief, definitely. But pride, no. She didn't reply. 2 days later, Stone called her into her office. The colonel sat stiff behind her desk, her eyes unreadable as always. A file sat open in front of her. "Reeves," Stone began, "you understand the significance of what you did. Command is already considering commendations, but I want to know something first. How do you see it?" Hesitated, searching for words. It was necessary. Al had to be stopped. But it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like a weight I can't put down. Stone studied her, then leaned back in her chair. "Good. If it felt easy, I'd be worried. The moment killing feels light is the moment you've lost your humanity. Don't lose it, Reeves. Not for medals, not for headlines." Nodded, the words sinking deeper than any praise could. Stone closed the file. "You'll be redeployed soon. Expect the whispers to follow you, both respect and resentment. Carry them both the same way, lightly." When left the office, the desert sun hit her face, hot and blinding. She squinted against it but didn't look away. Because maybe that was the lesson. You couldn't avoid the glare, you had to walk into it. Later, in the quiet of the range, Mitchell found her sitting with the rifle across her lap. "You haven't celebrated," he said softly. "There's nothing to celebrate," she replied. He tilted his head. "No, you stopped a man who would have killed countless more. That matters." Shook her head. "But it doesn't erase the fact that I killed him. That image doesn't leave." Mitchell crouched beside her, his voice steady. "You're right. It doesn't. And it shouldn't. The day you stop feeling the weight is the day you stop being worthy of the shot." His words settled over her like truth carved into stone. She realized then that the cost of the shot wasn't just hers to bear. It was part of the legacy of anyone who ever touched a trigger. That night wrote in her journal, not for Emma, not for command, for herself. "They see a record. They see numbers, distance, precision. But I see 4 seconds of silence and the weight of a man's life. They call it history. I call it a burden. And I will carry it because if I don't, then all of this was for nothing." When she closed the notebook, she felt no lighter, but she felt honest, and maybe that was enough. What happens when your name arrives before you do? The orders came 3 weeks after the shot. A new mission, new terrain, new team composition. Reeves was no longer just a staff sergeant in the unit. She was the Reeves, the one who had pulled off the impossible. That title traveled faster than orders. When she stepped off the transport into the dust and diesel stink of forward operating base Hadrian, eyes followed her. Some carried respect, others envy, a few open hostility. She wasn't just another soldier anymore. She was a symbol, a record, a story whispered in mess halls and briefing rooms. And symbols were heavier than rifles. The briefing room was tense before she even walked in. 10 men and women sat at the table, heads turning as she entered. A few straightened, like they were in the presence of someone beyond rank. Others slouched back, arms crossed, making it clear they weren't impressed. Major, the mission commander, cleared his throat. "This is Staff Sergeant Reeves. She'll be serving as sniper lead." The words landed like a grenade. Sniper lead. One soldier muttered under his breath. Another snorted. A third shook his head with a bitter smile. Didn't flinch. She kept her eyes forward, her face neutral. Inside, her stomach churned. Gestured to the map projected on the wall. "Our target is a high-value courier moving weapons across the border. We intercept him, cut off supply lines, and gather intel. The sniper team will provide overwatch during the capture. Reeves will have final authority on shots." Again the ripple of disbelief. Someone finally spoke, a corporal with a scar across his cheek. "With respect, sir, we've got trained snipers here. Why does she get lead?" His gaze hardened. "Because command says so. Because she's proven she can make the shot no one else could. End of discussion." Kept her posture still, but inside the words twisted. Proven she can make the shot. Not proven she could lead. Not proven she could endure, just the shot. Always the shot. Later, as the team loaded gear, the resentment boiled closer to the surface. "You're really going to tell us where to set up?" one soldier sneered. "Because of one trigger pull." Met his eyes, calm but firm. "Because of the math, because of the angles, because that's my job." He shook his head, muttering, "Lucky bullet." She didn't rise to it, didn't argue, because she knew nothing she said would change his mind. Only results would. But results weren't guaranteed. Not this time, not ever. The mission began before dawn. They moved through the dark, a convoy of shadows across sand and stone. The overwatch position was a ridge overlooking the valley road where the courier's convoy was expected. Lay prone, her rifle cradled against her shoulder, scanning the horizon through her scope. The others positioned nearby, still bristling with tension. No one said much. The radio crackled with his voice. "Convoy approaching. ETA 5 minutes. Sniper team, call it if you see anything unusual." Steadied her breathing. Through the scope she watched dust rise in the distance. The faint glint of metal, trucks, armed escorts, the courier's vehicle centered like a jewel in the crown. Her crosshairs tracked movement, guards scanning, rifles raised, no signs of awareness yet. She whispered into comms, eyes on, confirming convoy 3 trucks 1 SUV center, escort weapons mounted, distance 950 meters, crosswinds 5 from the west. Mitchell's calm voice wasn't here to steady her this time. This was hers alone. Copy said, stand by. The convoy slowed at the checkpoint below. Soldiers moved into position. The capture team tightened around the kill zone. And then something changed. Through her scope saw a man step from the SUV, not the courier. Too tall, too armed. He scanned the ridge line, suspicion etched into every movement. A counter-sniper. Her pulse spiked. She whispered into comms, potential overwatch spotter right side of SUV. He's scanning high ground, possible counter-sniper. Silence on the line, then one of the soldiers near her scoffed. I don't see anything, she's chasing ghosts. Clenched her jaw. Look again right side. The rifle's slung low, but it's there, he's glassing us. Still disbelief. His voice cut in. Reeves has called authority. If she says counter-sniper, treat it as fact. Reeves, what's your play? Her stomach twisted. She knew the weight of this call. If she was wrong, it would confirm every whisper, every doubt. If she was right and she hesitated, her team could die. Her finger tightened on the trigger. She tracked the figure's movements. The way he lingered on the ridge, the tension in his stance. She exhaled, paused, fired. The man dropped instantly, his body crumpling beside the SUV. Shouts erupted below. Guards scrambled, weapons raised. Contact confirmed, his voice snapped. Good call, Reeves, move on target. The valley exploded into chaos. The capture team stormed the road, gunfire cracking, vehicles swerving. Overwatch provided cover, rounds sparking off enemy trucks. Fired again and again, each shot deliberate, controlled. And through it all, she felt the team's eyes on her. Not with doubt this time, but with something closer to belief. The fight ended as quickly as it began. The courier was in custody, the convoy neutralized. The ridge went quiet. Lowered her rifle, her body trembling with adrenaline, she looked around. The soldiers who had doubted her earlier now moved differently. No smirks, no dismissive mutters, just silent acknowledgement. It wasn't friendship, it wasn't warmth, but it was something. Respect earned the hard way. Back at the base, debriefed the team. His tone was sharp but approving. Clean operation, target secured, minimal casualties, and credit where it's due, Reeves spotted the counter-sniper before he could tear us apart. That call saved lives. He didn't smile, he didn't soften, but the weight of his words carried. Afterward, one of the soldiers who had scoffed at her earlier approached. His expression was reluctant, but his voice low. You were right out there. I didn't see him until it was too late. You saved us. Met his eyes. She didn't gloat, didn't rub it in, she just nodded. We all did our jobs. He gave a brief nod back, and for the first time, the wall between them cracked. That night sat outside, the desert stars sharp above her. The rifle rested across her knees. She thought about how fast things changed. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a ghost on base, accused, ignored, doubted. Now she was a name that carried weight. But the weight didn't feel like victory. It felt like pressure. Every shot from now on wouldn't just be a bullet. It would be the shot. Every mission, every decision would be measured against the record she hadn't asked for. She whispered into the night, to no one but herself. How long can anyone carry that? And the stars, silent and cold, gave no answer. What happens when the mission ends, but the war inside does? The desert was quiet the morning after their return. Reeves sat alone on the ridge just outside the wire, her rifle laid carefully beside her. The sun hadn't yet burned away the chill, and the air smelled faintly of dust and oil. From here she could see the base stretching below, tents, vehicles, the constant shuffle of soldiers moving like ants. She watched them with detached calm, as if she were both part of them and apart from them. Because that's what she had become, a soldier, a story, a shadow. She pulled her notebook from her pocket, the one she'd been carrying since Kandahar, the one with pages stained by sweat and dirt and long nights of doubt. She opened to a blank page, the pen trembling slightly in her fingers. They think the hardest part is pulling the trigger. It is. The hardest part is waking up the next day and realizing you can't ever take it back. That moment defines you, whether you want it to or not, and everyone else decides what it means before you even figure it out for yourself. She stopped, staring at the words. They looked heavier on paper than they had in her head. Behind her, boots crunched on gravel. She didn't need to turn to know it was. "You always write out here?" he asked softly. "Only when the noise gets too loud," she said. He lowered himself to sit beside her, his movements stiff but familiar. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, comfortable in a way it hadn't been before. Finally said, "They're talking about medals, maybe even sending you stateside for a tour. You'll be the face of what's possible now." Let out a hollow laugh, the face of a bullet. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Do you regret it?" The question hung in the air. She thought of Al collapsing on the balcony, of the counter-sniper crumpling beside the SUV, of the team that walked away alive because of choices she had made. She thought of Emma's texts, filled with awe she didn't feel, of Brooke's venom, his resentment still echoing even if he said nothing now, of Stone's warning, "The moment killing feels light is the moment you've lost your humanity." "Regret," she whispered. "No, but pride, not that either." Nodded slowly. "I get that." They sat in silence again, watching the sun climb higher, turning the horizon from pale gray to burning gold. In the days that followed, life moved on. Missions came and went. Reports were filed. Soldiers rotated out. The war machine kept grinding. But noticed the subtle shifts. Where once she had been doubted, now she was deferred to. Orders she gave weren't questioned. Decisions she made carried weight. Soldiers who barely acknowledged her existence before now sought her advice. She should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt the weight grow heavier. Because with every nod, every salute, every whisper of her name, the myth grew, and myths weren't allowed to falter. One evening in the mess hall, a young private approached her, barely 19, his uniform still too crisp. He looked nervous, like he was about to address a legend instead of a woman who still woke from nightmares. "Sergeant Reeves?" he asked. She looked up from her tray. "Yeah." He swallowed hard. How did you do it? How do you stay calm enough to make a shot like that?" Studied him for a moment, then set her fork down. She could have told him about math, about wind calls, about breathing in the pause. She could have talked about endless hours of training. But none of that was the truth he needed. "You don't stay calm," she said quietly. "You just learn to fire through the fear." His eyes widened, and he nodded like she'd handed him something precious. He walked away, leaving staring at her food, appetite gone. Because she knew the truth was harsher still. Sometimes the fear never leaves. It just burrows deeper, waiting. 2 weeks later, orders came again. Another mission, another Overwatch. Didn't flinch. The work didn't stop, it never would. But the night before deployment, she called Emma. For once, she didn't hide behind short answers. "Em," she said softly when her sister picked up, "I need you to know something. When you hear people call me a hero, when they say I did something impossible, don't believe them." Emma's voice was gentle, worried. "Then what should I believe?" "Believe that I'm still your sister, that I'm still human, that I'm trying to carry something I'll never be able to put down, and that sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." There was a pause on the line. Then Emma whispered, "I believe you." And for the first time in weeks, let the silence on the other end feel like comfort instead of emptiness. The next morning, as the helicopter lifted her into the sky again, closed her eyes against the rush of wind and noise. The world would remember her for one shot, but she knew it wasn't the bullet that defined her. It was the weight she carried after, the quiet resilience, the choice to keep moving forward even when every step felt heavier than the last. And that, she realized, was the truth soldiers lived with. Not glory, not fame, not even victory. Just the burden of what they carried, and the strength it took never to set it down.